Today's Pretty Little Liars video essay is all about Emily Fields, how the show did her so dirty. She was being slept on the entire time and given really bad storylines. So let's get into it.
I want to explain what's been going on. Emily, don't make excuses for her. It's demeaning.
Out of all the girls in the show, Emily is the most wholesome. Aria was out there having a relationship with her teacher. Hannah was shoplifting. I couldn't personally relate to that, whereas I could relate to Emily. Emily grew up in Rosewood and was a talented swimmer from a young age. She met Alison De Laurentiis, the popular girl at the high school, and became a member of the posse. I think that's how you say it. I did not like that word at all, but she became in the it group, I guess, because of Alison. And wherever Alison went, attention seemed to follow. Emily has not had it easy compared to the other girls. They've all had their struggles, but I could really relate to some of Emily's struggles, and I think a lot of people can. Actually, I think Hannah's mum had some money problems, but Emily does too. She was a part of the high school swim team and had hoped for a scholarship, but at one point she ends up injured with a torn rotator cuff. There's this whole thing with her swimming career being ruined, and Maya dies. Her parents are initially horrible about her coming out, and in season 6, after the time jump, Emily is really struggling compared to the other girls. She lost her college scholarship, used up all of the money she'd saved up, and had to sell her eggs in order to try and get by. You would think that those struggles I mentioned would make her a really relatable character, because with all the girls, they have struggles and we see ourselves in them, and all the girls are pretty popular, particularly like Spencer and Hannah seem to be the fan favorites. But if I ever look at like a community poll or something that says, who's your favorite girl? Emily is always ranked the lowest and she's given the least attention. Emily is known as the boring character, and I want to really dive into, this is going to be a long video, why that is. How the hell did we get here? What happened? She is one of the 4 main girls. She should be one of the best characters in the show. Shay Mitchell, who plays her, did do the same facial expression no matter the scenario, like romance scene, she was doing this slight frown, scared scene, she'd do a slight frown, and it didn't vary much. She didn't have a whole lot of depth or layers like Troian Bellisario did maybe, but there were multiple scenes where she'd cry and make it authentic, so it was fine. It was enough to get by. It wasn't a huge problem. It was mainly her storylines. The first thing I really want to dive into is her relationships, because it's one of the reasons why her character is so misunderstood, overlooked, and not seen as that interesting.
Did you sleep there last night?
Allie's kind of having a rough time.
Are you allowed to go out and get some breakfast?
I actually should get back.
Unbelievable.
Paige, come on.
Nothing has changed, has it, Em?
No, she's in trouble.
No, she isn't. She saw us getting close again, and now she's trying to drive a wedge in between us.
Emily has so many relationships throughout the show that are so bad. All these brief flings with girls who don't even matter. Sometimes they'd come on for half a season and disappear and never be spoken of again. And other love interests were very prevalent, but they were not good. That started from a really bad, messy place, or where she was being bullied by the person or manipulated or used, and it turned into something romantic. One of my comments of the day I got on a community poll I did said Emily's love interests were an issue. The only one I really ever saw a connection with was Emily and Maya. I think Emily and Maya was such a sweet and innocent first love story. Her and Maya were probably the best, but Maya could be quite immature at times. Maya was also so secretive about her stalker, and it was frustrating because I hoped that at that point in the relationship she would trust Emily enough to know Emily could try and protect her and help her. It came at a time when Emily needed to learn about herself and grow and experience that relationship, but it wasn't necessarily supposed to last till like marriage, but it was a good relationship maybe for that phase of her life. Maya should not have been killed off. They did her so dirty. She didn't deserve that, and especially because it doesn't have like a huge significance. It really, the cause of it was pointless, and I don't understand why the writers felt like they had to do that in order to progress the plot. That doesn't happen to the other girls, you know. Ezra gets shot at one point, Caleb gets shot, but they don't actually die. The other girls don't lose a huge major love interest like that, but Emily does. I didn't like her with Shower Harvey. She liked Sara, she dated Sara, and Sara completely stabs her in the back and doesn't really come back from that. She dies at the end. So that's 2 girls that Emily has dated that died. Emily later meets a fellow swim team member, Paige, who was a closeted lesbian, so she was in denial about it, and her dad was really awful, so that was kind of shutting her down, which in itself sounds fine. It could make her a sympathetic character, but the problem with Paige at the beginning is that she's a garbage person. I respect everyone's opinions, okay? So if you love Paige, good for you. I'm really happy, and I hope you still like this video despite the fact that I don't like her. I really like charismatic on-screen characters who have a bit of zest and a bit of spunk and sass, and Paige was so incredibly dull to me in each scene she was in. When they first meet, they don't even like each other. Paige is a bully and dunks Emily's head under the water. When Emily is finally comfortable with herself and expressing her sexuality and feeling good about herself, Paige is stuck and in a different headspace, like, well, I don't want to come out yet. I want to keep this relationship a secret. And it's not necessarily unhealthy, but you're just in 2 different stages and probably shouldn't be in a relationship, because it will regress Emily. It will pull Emily back to the kind of person that she doesn't want to be anymore. She's moved past that. Although that being said, when Emily started off a relationship with Maya, Emily was in a place where she was like, I'm not ready for this. This is too much. She was pushing Maya away, feeling uncomfortable. So it's quite complicated, the topic, I think. I remember everyone recommending this book to me when I was looking for romance books to read, called Bully, and it's literally about this guy who's bullying a girl, and then the relationship ends up evolving into love. That grosses me out and makes me want to throw up. It's still quite normalized, I think, to fall in love with your abuser, and if it involves especially emotional manipulation like it was with Emily and Allison, or one person physically hurting the other, that's not on. Even though Paige does change and she becomes more likable in like the 5th season, it's just so wrong, and people can live their lives how they want to live them. That's just too much in my opinion. Cat Space, one of my subscribers, said basically this: Paige and Emily was the first time I saw the awful trope homophobic bully and gay victim equals love. Exactly. And Allison is stringing Emily along and weaponizing Emily's feelings for her against her in the earlier seasons, and to be honest, what is the point anyway? Because apparently, I didn't know this, but apparently in the spin-off they get divorced. So the writers clearly don't give a shit about their relationship, and it comes through because it didn't make any sense, dude. Even later in like the 7th season, everyone keeps pushing the fact that Allison's changed by verbally saying, Allison's changed. She's not the same person that she was, and it's very forced.
Allie did terrible things. Okay, but she's been through so much. She's not the same person she was.
Who is she now?
They are trying to tell it rather than showing it. And even then, when Allison's apparently so different, she's just not. Like at one point she kisses Emily and then is not okay with it and is being a bit off, and Emily's like, why did you kiss me? You know what it would mean for me. And Allison's like, I don't know. And Emily says, well, don't kiss me again then until you know. Everybody is already talking about Allison and Paige and what terrible love interests they were. I just think there is something worth adding. Emily was the first lesbian character I ever saw on TV, and as a young lesbian myself, she was kind of my representation, and I don't think I'm the only one. Exactly, for so many people, they hadn't even seen a TV show where there was a lesbian, so it was like, what? Like, this is a thing? Like, what is this? For me, Emily was the first girl I ever saw on screen dating girls and having her first kiss with a girl, and that's why I have such vivid memories of watching this show, because I remember being like, wait, this is incredible. It really opened my eyes and really normalized, I think, for me as a kid, seeing girls dating girls in a really healthy way. It's important that you don't screw up Emily's character, because she has a whole audience of people out there really connecting to her. You said, so when the writers put her with Paige and Allison, they were saying to me and all the young queers like me who didn't know any better that these relationships were okay, that they were the best we could get, that if our partners sometimes hurt us or manipulated us or assaulted us, that it was okay. Exactly. The bar is too low. The only part of Allison and Emily's relationship that I even remotely liked was the fact that it started off as a hidden love sort of thing. Like Emily had this huge crush on Allison, but she never told anyone about it and no one knew. I'm a sucker for that trope. But in that case, it was toxic because no one knew about it. Allison could get in there behind the scenes and manipulate Emily. There weren't any signs she even liked girls genuinely throughout the show. I was shocked when she said that she actually loved Emily at the end. Also, all the ships, especially like Aria and Ezra, get their ships sailing, get it going pretty early on. But with Allison and Emily, the heat really starts building up in season 5, and then that relationship is dropped and all that tension just goes down the drain because they don't even communicate or seem to be pining after each other for ages. And then suddenly in season 7, it's like the writers went, oh my gosh, we're coming near to the end of the show. Emily needs to end up with someone. We haven't actually planned ahead or invested in building her romantic tension with someone. So who can we bring in to be her end game love interest? I know Allison will do, I guess. They're interested in each other again after me honestly forgetting they were even a couple in the first place. Emily's relationships were genuinely, I can say this hand on heart, were not that good. I've seen good romances in TV shows, you know, I've thought about them for days afterwards and how good they were. This was not good. None of her relationships were good.
I stuck up for you. Against Paige, against Spencer, against everyone. I wasted so much time on you. Emily.
Another one of you said, I believe that if Allison was the villain, her relationship with Emily would have been a lot better. Like this enemies to lovers, like they hate each other because Allison was manipulative and evil, but they couldn't ignore the lust and tension between them when they were alone. Plus, it would have made Emily a way more interesting character with more depth. You could show Emily and Allison throughout the seasons in this unhealthy, obsessive, twisted love where there was a lot of lust there on both ends, but also a lot of mutual disrespect and toxicity. You could at the same time have Emily getting to know someone who is like her soulmate, perfect for her. Maybe she doesn't see it at first, but then when she does, she dumps Allison and she continues to have a really healthy relationship with this other girl. And that would have made more sense and been more healthy. My next comment is from Sophia. I didn't like that Emily ended up with Allison. Emily's love interests throughout the show were boring and with little thought put into them, unlike with the other liars. Emerson being endgame was a lazy move made just to please the fans. It was very clear the writers didn't care about Emily, or at least didn't find her as interesting as the other girls, which is a shame. Emerson could have worked if the writers cared to give them a proper storyline. I feel the true purpose of Emily's character was to represent LGBTQ plus people, so that's why she was a very relationship oriented character, which for many may have been boring to watch 100%. And you know, the worst part is she can be that representation, okay, 100%, yes, but it does not need to become her entire identity. Now, Aria was given the second worst storylines because they were very on and off, repetitive, involving her and Ezra being the most unstable couple in TV history. But at least it felt like the writers really cared about them as a couple and were trying with them, trying to do different edgy things to make them stand out, like that kiss scene they had in the rain, which I'm not gonna lie, I kind of like, which is so bad. That's the only scene with them I really like, is that one. They were incorporating obstacles, trying to keep it interesting, like Jackie A getting in the way, the parents trying to spice it up. And I'm not saying I enjoyed those storylines, but it was obvious some thought was being put in. The other storylines were involving Emily and her sexuality, and it's like the writers were stuck in a hole and didn't know what to do with her character. Each time they were filming or writing, they were like, God, I don't know, and she was an afterthought. Emily's relationships felt out of place and like they were happening on a different plane of the show, and they wouldn't mean anything, they weren't significant. But when you look at the show as a whole, everyone else, for instance, Hannah and Caleb, they're pretty consistent. They might break up, but overall, you know they'll end up together. You're like, yes, they'll make their way back to each other. Spencer and Toby, you're like, yes, this is the couple. This is her soulmate. This is the one. As cringy as that sounds, that's true. That's it. Whereas with Emily, there were points watching the show when I was like, God, out of all these love interests, who's she gonna choose to end up with? Like, I have no idea who she's meant to be with because they're all as bland as each other. She barely had a connection with any of them, and they didn't have storylines because the writers really didn't care. If you think about it, Ezra had more storylines that were not about Arya than vice versa. So Ezra had Malcolm, Jackie, his family. You find out Ezra's actually rich or something. He's well-rounded. He goes through that stage in like season 6 and 7 where he gets all sassy and he grows a beard or stubble or something and he gets snappy. And with Toby, he has stuff with his mom and Jenna. And then with Emily's love interests, most of them, it was like, I don't even know who you are. Your personality trait, like Talia, is that you like to cook and you have a husband. Shower Harvey liked showering. Caleb had all of the foster parents, his uncle that was actually his father. I don't remember a lot about Toby, to be honest, but if we think about Paige, Samara, or even Maya, we barely know them outside of Emily. And this comment was such a wake-up call for me. I was like, that is so right. But now let's quickly talk about the lack of effort. This is a whole section now. Lack of effort is the title of this section. So, oh my God. There is a lack of consistency with Emily's character, which makes her feel not well-rounded and lazy. One of you guys said Emily is always verbally described as being the weak link and the loyal one, but they don't do enough to establish her loyalty or where it lies. She has new girlfriends every season, sometimes multiple times a season, like in season 1 she had like 3. Granted, she doesn't cheat, but how are you going to tell me the loyal one is already into a new girl like 2 episodes after she was traumatized by the death of the first girl who ever openly returned her feelings? Not only that, but a fair amount of her love interests were actually kind of toxic. If I remember right, Maya was supposed to be in a long-distance relationship with some guy from her hometown, but she made advances on Emily anyway, literally the first day she was moving in. So much happens with this show I can't actually remember. That's bad. Paige tried to drown her, a moment in time in which anti-Pages have brought up and beaten to death, although I really did start liking her character more after she got comfortable with her sexuality. I was all right with her and Emily as a couple, but I didn't feel much chemistry between them until after the time jump. Was there chemistry before the time jump? That was dead. Why would such a loyal person be so open to people just being loosey-goosey on their partners? Her tag as being the loyal one was some of the only character development we got for her, and it was a name only. The trait of loyalty is actually something that could easily be exploited by a clever villain, and they could have actually done something interesting with it if they bothered to show instead of tell, literally. I don't have a good sense of why she liked Allison or most of the other people she liked exactly. Now let's talk about season 1, what happens with her character, and later how that compares to the other seasons. It's been a year since Allison's gone missing, the girls have drifted apart, Maya has moved into Allison's house, and Emily gets to know her and starts getting feelings for her.
When did they get back? 10 days. I can't imagine how happy you are. When I see him, I'll be happy. When he's really home.
Emily's coming out story is actually interesting, and her friends are supportive of it before she even comes out. They're being really sweet. Other than that, what is it with Emily not reporting stuff? Her boyfriend Ben, she ends up breaking up with, and I thought we'd see more of him and that would mean something for her. Ben basically attacked Emily in the locker room, and luckily Toby intervened, or God knows what would have happened, because he was starting to like pull down her strap and her swimsuit, force himself on her, and luckily she got away. So I thought she's going to tell the principal or her friends or the teacher or a police officer or someone she trusts. There are multiple scenes of people asking her, hey, what happened to Ben? Aren't you going to invite Ben to this event? What's going on? And she's like, no, like we broke up. She doesn't actually say what Ben did to her. She completely disrespects herself. It's not explained why she doesn't tell them. That one time Paige was bullying her, a competitor monitor being unprofessional and disrespectful, and Paige made like a subtly homophobic comment, and they're called into the locker room to talk to the coach who's heard about this comment being made. And rather than Emily just throwing Paige under the bus and saying, yeah, well, she did say it, so she should own up to her own actions, Emily literally says to the coach, I don't know why we're here, like whatever the issue is, it's resolved now. She doesn't tell her parents about Paige dunking her head under the water or being hostile towards her in that way.
It's like your mom said, my dad is always looking for somebody to blame.
I have to go home. My mom's waiting for me.
Right, your mom's waiting. God, why is everything so easy for you?
People can like what they want to like, that's fine, but I cannot imagine wanting to be in a relationship as boring as that. What would we talk about? Normally, I love it when a show does enemies to lovers. People love this trope. It's one of the most popular ones, but they still managed to screw it up. How is that possible? If they're done well, like in Pride and Prejudice, what makes them compelling is the whole misunderstandings, miscommunication, like being too proud, right? That's their character flaw. To actually give the person a chance, maybe just being a bit too judgmental. I prefer romances like in the Princess Diaries too, Aiden and Annika from the freaking Barbie movies, or Annie and Liam in 90210, because they have those compelling elements. With Paige and Emily, they're rivals. Paige is so unnecessarily rude and disrespectful towards Emily for no reason other than the fact that she sees Emily as a threat, which is so immature. And when they're arguing in the car, she just gets into Emily's car and she says something to Emily like, God, why is everything so easy for you? Oh my God, that is a disgusting thing to say to someone. You don't know her struggles. You don't know what she's been through, okay? How dare you? Could you imagine if someone said that to you? Like, how presumptuous. And Emily obviously gets upset about this and she's like, you know what, you don't know me. She goes on a rant, and as she's in mid-sentence, Paige kisses her. You cannot tell me that was consensual. No way in hell was that consensual. First of all, there were no indicators that Paige was like interested in her romantically, no signs. So to Emily, she wasn't then giving signals back that she was interested. Emily had given no signs. She'd given signs that she didn't like Paige. Hello, my cat's it. Okay, so, oh, they can just see your tail, you little cutie pie. Could you imagine if it was a scene with a guy and a girl in a car, and the girl's like upset about something and ranting about it because the guy's just being mean to her, and then the guy kisses her mid-sentence? People would be in uproar. So it's, oh my God, she never joins in the videos. When I say she never joins in, say hi. Say hi to the world. These are my lovely subscribers. And later in season 1B, Samara's trying to help Paige with coming out, and she's being very helpful, very respectful, and Paige is so rude to her. And I know Paige is feeling defensive and uncomfortable, okay, but she's just, I can't stand her. She's so freaking rude. You've had
this whole thing with knowing that Emily likes Allison and pining over her.
Emily and Paige. You have Emily and Maya. Oh my God. And then you have Emily and Samara, all in one season. At least with someone like Aria and Ezra. Her and Ezra are there, they're consistent, stuff goes wrong, Noel is sort of getting in the way, but then she's back to Ezra again. You know, it's sort of, it makes sense. Unbelievable. Emily does a few interesting things in terms of the A storyline and an interaction with Ian. Pretty bland stuff. So let's get on to season 2. Action. So Emily's storylines were starting to drag towards the end of season 1 when, lo and behold, Paige is introduced. What a surprise. But I was really hoping that season 2 would be a good time for her, where things would really kick off. There are moments where Emily does actually do stuff. Like at one point, Emily looks at Ian's suicide letter and starts to see a pattern there and does her own detective work. Great stuff. I love it. Emily moves into Hannah's house, which I love. Emily is such an angel, making breakfast for the family. Stuff like that I want to see more of. Just her doing little sweet gestures, you know, like that's what I want to see. She and Hannah don't seem to enjoy each other's company much when they're living together. I know when I was a teenager, it would have been my dream to have one of my friends living with me. What is interesting is when Emily falls to the floor panting in school and she feels so awful, and you realize that due to stress she's got an ulcer or something, and A's been, I think, putting stuff in her ointment she's using with human growth hormones. I liked Samara and Emily. I had someone on my last video say, I can't believe you liked Samara and Emily, they were so boring. I'm just saying that I liked them more than the other couples. I'm not saying they were anything crazy. I said they could have been amazing. There were multiple scenes where Samara was really dull and boring. None of her love interests were great for Emily, okay? Oh my god! Look at that face. Oh. And also I found out recently that Samara was way too old for Emily anyway. Their relationship ended so abruptly, which I thought was odd, and it turns out I think the actress was off doing a project for the Vampire Diaries or something, but it's strange because one minute she's there and the next minute she's not there. A blackmails Emily into giving her phone number to one of Samara's friends. Samara gets mad and is like, what are you doing? Emily comes up with an excuse, honestly, that isn't even that good. She could have tried harder. After that, Samara clearly felt bad because she'd called Emily like 2 or 3 times. There were missed calls. Such bad writing. You would want to hear what Samara had to say. She's calling to apologize, say she overreacted, let's just forget about it. You would always pick up, okay, always. But she doesn't. She's like, oh no, I can't. And later on, the girls ask her what happened with Samara, and she's like, that didn't work out. What do you mean that didn't work out? Like, you seem to really like her. What happened? Also, sometimes Emily is quite dumb. They can all be very stupid, but at one point they're breaking into Jason's shed. Emily, of course, leaves her torch behind, just on the floor. It's like, why would you do that? It's so freaking dumb. Like, bring it with you. They're on the phone to Hannah, and they don't want Hannah to feel left out, so they don't want Hannah to know that all the girls are hanging out at Spencer's place, and then Emily smashes something. It's like, Emily, please, honey. But all the girls do stupid stuff, to be fair, so it's not that unusual. It seems like things aren't working out with Maya in season 2, and Emily doesn't stay single for long because Paige is in the picture again. And it would have been great if Emily could just do her own thing for a bit and be single, like investigate the Vivian Darkbloom thing. Emily's at the grill and sees someone who looks like Maya and gets all excited, realizes it's not, she's upset, she runs out, gets talking with Paige. Emily's clearly not wanting to flirt. She's in a bad mood. Paige tries to comfort her and then tries to kiss Emily. Again, that was not, you cannot tell me that was consensual. Emily was not in the right headspace, giving no indication she wanted to be kissed.
When things get tough, she bails. What you really need is someone you can count on. What are you doing?
And you find out in season 3 that Emily was either drunk or drugged or something was going on, and she went to talk to Paige and kissed Paige, and Paige literally said this. She admitted this. She was like, yeah, I didn't stop you. Yeah, what is it with Paige kissing Emily when she's clearly not in the mood or not able to consent? So, season 3, Emily has clearly not been taking Maya's death well. Finally, something different. Bravo, round of applause. So she's excessively drinking.
Maybe you thought I was someone else. I think I knew that. But I didn't stop you. I didn't want to stop you. It was like a dream. And then what happened?
And then she's seen standing over Alison's grave holding a shovel. She's trying to piece together what happened that night, what the hell was going on. And for a while, this is so interesting. I'm fully invested, but then somehow they managed to make it boring. She interacts with Ezra for a while. That's kind of interesting, but then that's dropped and doesn't really go anywhere. I didn't mind the introduction of Lyndon James, but with most of their conversations, I was thinking, where is this going? What is the point? Why are you talking? Who is he? Is he just going to disappear off the show like every other person she's ever talked to? You find out he killed Maya. It's not linked to the A plot. It would only take them literally, I think, about 10 minutes extra plotting time to figure out how it could tie back into A to make it significant, or tie back to Allison to make it relevant, but it doesn't. He's just this random nasty stalker. Emily kills him, and even that doesn't affect her in the long run overall as a character or send her down a different path. From season 3 onwards, that's when it really starts to feel like her presence is forced. it's a mistake. They're trying to make her relevant when she shouldn't be there. And a lot of you guys were saying this is the point where she should have been killed off. I could not disagree more. Killing her off would highlight even more that the writers didn't care about her. All she needed was some investment and some nurturing. Like if you look at plants, Emily's just one of the plants, okay? It's not going to flourish and grow if it's not given a bit of time and love to really blossom and bud. When you look at her as a person, she could be so good if more thought was given to her character arc and her development, her consistency, her storylines. Season 4, to be fair, does take greater risks and go further than any A has before, but it does become a bit trashy and soap opera-like. A car gets smashed into Emily's living room and Emily gets an injury in season 4. That's interesting, I guess. Emily's locked in a box by A in Ravenswood. She has scenes with Shana, a character who we don't care about, one of my least favorite in the show.
She wants to meet you, Emily, tonight, but you have to go alone. That's the only way to be safe. By me. Guess you really were her favorite.
The only thing I like is her thinking about Allison coming back. That's kind of cool. Meanwhile, other people's storylines are more compelling. Like Spencer's got her drug thing going on. Aria finds out about Ezra's betrayal and his book. Season 5, it seems like Emily might be doing pageants or dancing. I was like,
Praise the Lord. I was so excited. I was like, oh my God.
she's gonna become like the next young Miss America. She's gonna do pageants and catwalks and career on the side of her schoolwork. It's gonna be amazing, and boom, it's dropped. Why would you drop it? We'll never know. Such a waste of time. Emily meets Sydney, who again is one of my least favorite characters, who no one cares about. So I swear, Emily interacts with characters who are the worst of the worst. She has Paige, Shana, and Sydney, and it's Emily who's interacting with those terrible characters. With Sydney, she's entering a situation trusting someone who is not trustworthy. So she's not loyal at this point. She's stupid and gullible.
Is Jenna hiding in the trunk? Please, let me explain. How would I ever trust anything you said again?
I used to volunteer at the school for the visually impaired.
Yeah, in Philadelphia.
I was there the day that Allison came to visit Jenna, and I pretty much glued Jenna back together when Allison left.
Allison is back in season 5 and a big part of the show, and the girls are too quick to go along with her story when Allison's lying to the police. They're too quick to support her, and it's so weird. They seem like committed to helping her at one point, but then they turn their backs on her and turn her in, thinking she's A with honestly no evidence. Ridiculous. Allison and Emily have the most intriguing, amazing conversations. It feels like it could go somewhere so interesting, and you could see some sort of development in their conversation. That whole build up with them kissing and stuff is dropped as if it never happened, as if it never meant anything. Emily and Paige rekindle their romance, but then Paige has to move to California. Newsflash, no one cares. Lonely and heartbroken over Paige's departure, Emily starts a relationship with Talia. Emily discovers Talia is married, puts an end to things. Wait, Talia must be way too old for her as well if she was married. Oh my God. Disgusting. The show couldn't be bothered as well to make all of Emily's relationships distinctive and unusual, which is the worst part. Regurgitate the same old formula. So by that I mean earlier in the show, she and Maya made out in a movie theater, okay? Pretty distinctive. Like, I always associate a movie theater with her and Maya. It's like a trademark, I guess, and it's distinctive. And then she and Samara, I think, even went to the same movie theater for their date, which is a little awkward, to be honest, and not really needed, because it makes them, the romances, too similar and seem not that special as individuals. And in a separate situation, Emily is on her first date with Paige, and this thing is that they have this habit of finishing each other's sentences, or Emily sort of interrupting her and filling in the blank for her. Read each other's mind almost. I was like, cool. Emily is getting to know Talia, and Talia attempts to say something, but Emily cuts in before she has a chance. Someone says something like, I wouldn't say I'm the smoothest person, but I'm generally a little less. And then I think Talia fills in the blank for Emily and says, neurotic? And they both laugh, like it's a cute moment. All her relationships even end in the same way, like there's an obstacle, something comes up or goes wrong, and the relationship disappears off the face of the earth. So season 6. They had that whole dollhouse thing. Emily didn't stand out particularly in the dollhouse. She didn't do anything that made her seem kind of like she was shaking things up. She was just sort of in it with the girls, experiencing it with them as a group. And after they get rescued, Emily drifts from her friends and her kind and trusting persona is taken down a little bit. Finally, something different. She gets a gun. She's wanting to learn how to defend herself and her family. And I like it because it built in the protector thing, that energy she gives off earlier of being a bit too codependent and wanting to like fix people or protect them rather than looking after herself. So I was like, cool, they're going to take this further. They're going to escalate it. And I loved seeing all the girls' different coping mechanisms and stuff. But then it doesn't actually go anywhere for long enough. The aftershocks of the dollhouse lead her to a friendship with the former missing girl who was also a victim, Sara Harvey, Charles's prisoner.
Sara is a complete weirdo.
Good morning, girls. I just got off the phone with Dr. Sullivan, and she was able to make time to see both of you today.
Dr. Sullivan is a therapist.
She works with people who've experienced trauma.
I'm gonna take a shower.
What just happened? I forgot what it's like to swim, to feel weightless. You gave me that.
And I understand maybe being brainwashed by Allison or something when you're young, but also falling for Sara is ridiculous. Sara was so dodgy. All these missing gaps with her and her obsession with showering, apparently. Such bad writing. They don't even make the effort to explain whether Sara ever genuinely cared about Emily or not. They never even try to bring that relationship full circle or develop it and give us an answer our burning question. Because for me, I actually was curious to know, did she ever really care? What were her motives? No. She betrays Emily, and it's kind of inconsistent because one minute she's being an absolute freak, stalking her and following her and being a creep, and the next minute she's like,
I tried to keep you safe.
bad writing.
Is she her friend or is she her foe? It's not that hard. Make a decision.
They were bothered with Ezra. They explained why he betrayed Arya. Yeah, he's a horrible person, but they did explain sort of what was going on with the book scenario, and that at some point he did start to genuinely develop feelings for her. With Sara, I'm like, I have no idea where her head was at, and you know what? You should have explained it. Emily needed a good storyline, and that would have been interesting. After the time jump, you finally get something different with Emily. She's a bit darker, she's a bit edgier, and you learn that her dad's death caused her to spiral completely out of control and drop out of school. She faked her graduation picture and returned home, where she kept up her facade of lies. Basically, she's just in a really bad place. She has this scene at her father's grave where she confesses to her father her issues in school and why she's flaking out, and you're like, wow, this is so good. Sara Harvey interrupts it, and you don't even get to sort of get a conclusion to that scene and like wrapping it up. And in later episodes, her dad's death doesn't really affect her character enough or bring her to go to new lengths or do different things. And season 7 now. The whole forced impregnation thing was one of the worst things the show's ever done. I did a community poll about this. I'm not going to read all the answers, but I had so many comments saying either weird or out of place, like why, or creepy. And a few of you didn't mind it. You were like, well, I think it shows that A really was going to destroy people's lives and take things to greater lengths. But to me, it's just too odd and too messed up for it to be necessary, and used as a plot device to get Allison and Emily together. It's like they realized those two had been separated and pushed apart by the writers for so long. There's not a spark anymore. It's died out. So bad. Allison was impregnated by A with Emily's eggs, because we know Emily had given up her eggs earlier, so they were given to Allison by A. The best part is they didn't even explain why A or AD would do that, why they cared so much, why they were the biggest Allison and Emily shippers of the century. Were they reading Allison and Emily fan fictions like we were? Were they also invested in the relationship? All the girls' friendship is based on a bit of trauma bonding, and again, it just felt like, are they actually in it to be together, or are they just kind of rushing into it based on feeling like it's the right thing to do for the child? I would like to know.
Is it Archers? Of course. Who else would it be? Oh my god, I can't believe this is happening.
I thought we were careful.
Alison gave birth to Emily's blonde-haired, blue-eyed babies. I don't know how the hell that happened because we know it was Ren's sperm. Ren has quite dark brown eyes and brown hair, and Emily has obviously very black hair, brown eyes. The baby's complexions and features should be much more dark. They should not look like Alison's babies. How did that happen? That's weird, right? That is weird. Cringy. Actually a YouTuber. I haven't watched their videos, but check out their channel because it's really cute. They commented and they recommended my channel and stuff, so sweet. But they said, I never understood why AD did it. It didn't really lead to anything, nor make sense. Why would Archer want to artificially inseminate Alison with Ren's babies? What was the point of it? Shock value, and for the wrong reasons. Shocking because of how unethical it was. I get how it can be terrifying, as it's a message to say, I can control your body, your DNA, but it really felt icky. Maybe I'm biased against Emerson as well, like I am. By the time they got together, Alison was a shell of a person, completely codependent, without any real personality and without properly redeeming herself, and it felt like a shoehorned gay couple because Emily was an afterthought. Another comment of the day, I actually think Emily convincing Alison to keep the baby was all kinds of messy and horrifying. The whole they're half yours Emily thing didn't jive with me. At the end of the day, Alison has been forced and tortured to be a mother against her knowledge. That's some sick level of violation, and they handle it like Emily should have any say in it. Yet to be fair, Alison is the one giving birth to the child. It's her physical body going through that process, so it really should be her decision at the end of the day. When Alison decides to give birth, Emily doesn't even try to help her through the trauma of it. Instead, she talks about being afraid Alison will run off and leave her alone with the baby, or she gets mad at Ali for skipping taking her vitamins, and the trauma of the situation, along with Alison's agency, gets stripped away because, oh, poor Emily. Sure, endgame Emerson was toxic, but not just in one direction. Such an interesting take. I can't remember all the events you described just because, like I said, so much happens in this show, but look, it takes two to tango. Half of season 7 is Alison being a victim, and again Emily is her knight in shining armor. Alison needs saving from her husband, who was being really awful. Actually, that was a dark twist. You have Emily rushing in to protect her. Alison is attacked by Uber A, who's dressed as like a police officer, and again Emily's there. In an earlier season, someone, I think it's A, tries to strangle Alison with a scarf, and I think Emily was there to help her. Yeah, and then in like season 7, they're chasing A down or something in the school hallways, and Alison gets pushed over. You hear her scream or something, and Emily's like, Alison! Alison, like I said, kisses Emily that came out of nowhere. She tells Emily that her life is a mess, and Emily says, everyone's life is a mess, Alison, okay? It's not just you. The only scene I like is when Paige says to Emily, hey, have you noticed how Alison is always the victim? Emily was dating someone called Sabrina in like season 6 or 7 too. I'm pretty sure Sabrina could bake as well, or she worked in the coffee shop. Boring again. And I can't remember anything about Sabrina, so that just says it all. Emily goes up for a position as the Rosewood High School swim coach, only to learn that her ex-girlfriend Paige is also up for the job. So they have these, honestly, I'm so done with it, pathetic arguments between Alison and Paige, so Alison clearly hasn't grown up at all.
I just want to say how great it is that Paige is really pitching in on this, really taking the lead.
Thanks, Alison.
Seriously though, it's such a step forward for you. I mean, usually people who are new, they, I don't know, go with something safer like a pep rally, but you're really pushing your personal comfort zone.
It's not that big a deal.
Oh, don't be modest.
Alison's all jealous that Paige seems to be spending time with Emily, and likewise Paige seems possessive and jealous of Alison and Emily's connection. Alison used to bully Paige, leave the poor girl alone, grow up, stay out of it, and Emily spends way too much time then defending Alison to everyone. Paige is not innocent either. That's what people forget as well. She was acting as if she had some sort of ownership over Emily, or some sort of right to tell Emily who she should talk to or defend or spend time with. Like, it is not her job to be stepping in constantly for Emily or trying to fix her or change her. Like, if that's who Emily is choosing to invest her time in, and that's who she's choosing to interact with, you need to leave it, okay? Like, it makes her seem very overly involved in Emily's life when she is continually trying to dictate who she talks to. Paige urges Alison to confront her feelings for Emily, and that's fine. That I was like, okay, fair enough. I feel like my space buns are asymmetrical. Emily's storylines are boring. Like, everyone else has something at some point interesting going on. Emily, again, has a few scenes or storylines where I'm like, yeah, but then a lot where they're just really bad. And often too, if it's a good storyline, it's her and Aria doing something, or her and Spencer doing something. It's never just her. Emily was just there, almost witnessing it or helping. And there are so many scenes of Emily and Addison interacting in season 7. I wouldn't have minded so much in season 1, but Addison is infuriating. She has the same name as Allison practically. She's a carbon copy of her. Of course, it's poor old Emily again that has to interact with this boring character and to be responsible for interacting with her. So freaking boring, I can't. With Emily, I wonder, like, is this a discrimination thing? And I say that because so often it is a discrimination thing. I can't help but speculate that that's part of the reason why she got those worse storylines. Let's talk about my biggest issue with Emily. So I think Emily doesn't even have a lot of chemistry with the other 3 main girls. They all treat her like she's dumb and incapable of making her own choices. Like the whole thing with her being friends with Toby. They freaked at her for bringing him to the dance. Or when Spencer goes to Emily's coach about Paige's nasty comments without even consulting Emily. They made her extremely naive, and that's ultimately the downfall of her character, especially in her relationships. Like, why did she end up with Paige, who almost drowned her? Why end up with Allison, who bullied her? Emily passively stood by during bullying or awkwardly ignored things in the early seasons. She stands and looks away, and how is that sweet? It comes across as Emily either being rude, complicit, or like Shay didn't know how to act as Emily when it wasn't her line. Exactly, like if she's sweet, you would see her freaking out more when Allison's mistreating people or something, right? If they didn't keep saying she's the sweet one, if I told you my character analysis of her, my conclusion would be, I don't know. I don't really feel like I know her.
Hey, Hermie, you got a camera on that thing? Making dust booty or something?
My rudder got stuck.
Oh, I bet it did. Go frighten the fish. Hey. Hey, what?
Do you think you can walk me home after school? Everything that happened with A at my house was just really intense.
Sure.
How's your arm? It's okay. I'll be fine. I don't know if I'll be fine. Do you think the teachers will see my bruises? What if they ask questions? I mean, that's the kind of thing that they have to report, don't they?
Allie, breathe.
Jason came back from New York the same night as us. He was in my room last night. Jason? Oh my God. No, you can't stay here tonight. You need to tell your dad you want to sleep at Spencer's.
It wasn't made explicit enough how she'd grown over the years or overcome her old bad habits. Meg said, I think a big problem with her is that the writers couldn't figure out how to expand her character. She never gets new goals, any type of motivation. Lots of stuff just happened around her while she stayed still. Also the fact that her dad, who was the only nice father in the entire show, died off screen to give Emily something to be sad about. It's really a shame because Emily is a character that means so much to me. When they don't know what to do with a character or they're stuck, they go tragedy. Let's shove tragedy in their face. T. Parker Evans said Emily's main issue is the amount of times she trusts people who end up treating her dirty. Nate, she trusts. Oh my God, yes! Shana, Shower Harvey, Damien the reporter. Aurora said making her end up with Allison was so frustrating. She went back to a situation where someone was controlling her. Emily is so self-destructive. She would go back to someone who bullied her and blackmailed her. So as a whole, it made it seem as if Emily didn't know herself at all. Let's briefly talk about the portrayal of people in the LGBTQ plus community. One of you guys said advertisers weren't okay with showing Emily in a romantic relationship early in the show compared to Ezra, or her love scenes were more hinted at and fade to black than the other girls, which I think affected how her relationships came across sometimes. Ian Harding commented he thought they would have more of a problem with Ezra. Oh, and Sara. Clearly the writers wanted to do a full Allison Emily betrayal, so they did a watered down version with Sara and Emily, but no one cared because Sara was so randomly introduced and obviously shady. There was no emotional impact or history between them to make it work, and making Sara a copycat of Allison didn't help. Exactly.
I'm sure Allison was a great person, but Sara wasn't.
People are grieving, they do weird things, but if you're attracted to someone, you are or you aren't, and it would seem weird to kiss them when you're not even attracted to their gender. The girls were trying to figure out if Holden is interested in Aria or not. They're asking her questions like, do you think he likes you? And they jump to the assumption that he's definitely gay because he doesn't hit on you. And then Spencer says, has he ever tried to kiss you? And Aria's like, no. And And Spencer's like, oh, gay then, must be gay. You can be straight and be attracted to someone and, you know, be too scared to ask them out or maybe not want to kiss them. Also, if I kissed every single person I thought was attractive, I would have kissed a lot of people and they would have been people I'd barely even spoken to.
He's not really interested.
I know what it means. He's gay.
He's not gay. I've known him since I was 5.
He might not have known when he was 5. Has he ever tried to kiss you? No? Gay.
I don't know why, but it seems so performative that every girl Emily went near was either gay or bi. Adding those characters felt so forced and ingenuine. Yeah, so basically, in summary, practically every girl in Rosewood dates Emily, which felt a little bit like they were trying to shove it down our throats that they're being inclusive, which is what a lot of you guys said in comments. Also, Emily can't actually maintain a healthy long-term relationship for so long. She's just jumping from brief fling to brief fling, and those flings often end on bad terms. There were obvious improvements with the other couples in terms of how they were handled. They were just crafted and written better a lot of the time. Like that one time Ezra and Arya broke up. I mean, there are so many times. Who knows which scenario I'm thinking of. I'm thinking of that time around season 6, and it took them ages to make their way back together, and I think it was the book getting written that made them really excited and kiss, but it was really good, like that journey and that progression of them hanging out and talking again. Or that one time, I think it was Ezra betrayed Arya or something. They didn't get back together straight away. It wasn't perfect, but it was just a lot more interesting, and like the writers had put effort into thinking about how it would happen. Whereas with Emily and Allison, for example, a lot of the time, their relationship and how they get back together is treated like an afterthought, like something that doesn't really matter, and it's just not very well done. Emily ends up with Allison, which is problematic in itself, because when they first knew each other, Allison would manipulate Emily and make Emily actually feel almost ashamed of her sexuality, or like she wasn't deserving enough for Allison to love her. Allison at one point said, "I'm only kissing you because it's practice for the real thing." The writers expect us to buy that Allison is this reformed, amazing girl, but it was so bad. Even when Allison first comes back in like season 5, oh my gosh, she's so shaky. It's not even clear whether we can trust her or not, and she behaves really deplorably at points, very nasty, and then we're meant to feel sorry for her, and it's really back and forth. It's like the writers weren't really sure themselves. So I mean, I was not trusting her basically all of season 5, and the girls were very uncertain as well. So it's very difficult then to believe that in like season 6 she really has changed. And there are good and bad moments of representation in the show. Some moments that are cute and fine, like when Hannah really seems to want Emily to just be happy and date whoever she wants to date. But at other points there are a lot of bad things, like they hint at Jenna being bi and dating Shana, and both those characters are obviously made into villains, and the relationship between those two is made quite comical as well. Like Shana apparently loves Jenna so much she'll be a complete doormat and do anything for Jenna, even if it involves hurting others. And also, you don't really see, like I said, many of the other guys in the show, like Caleb or Ezra, saying they're bisexual or something. It's just Emily dating girls in a sea of straight couples. And in terms of Charlotte, she's transgender, but her motives to be a kidnapper and stalker stem from that. It stems from her childhood and not being accepted. Her transgender identity and the crimes she commits are tied together. CeCe is the only transgender character on the show. She's the only representation there is, which really sucks because she is a villain. She's not a nice person, even when she was reunited with Allison again. And her identity as a trans woman was not treated with respect because the writers were obviously looking for a plot twist or a clever trap, like a way to shock us. And they thought, making it a character who everyone thinks is a boy but actually is a girl will be a really cool plot twist. So they were valuing that over actually being sensitive towards how they portrayed her character and her struggles, and it was so unnecessary. I can see the issues with the show, and the flaws with it, but I love this show. Like, I wouldn't spend this much time talking about it and making videos about it if I didn't enjoy it, and it's definitely nostalgic for me and a comfort watch, and I do think it's a lot of fun. So this isn't me having an issue with the show, it's just that I think it's a shame because Emily could have been such a cool character and she deserved better. I'm not being hateful towards it by critiquing it or by saying that Emily should have gotten a better storyline or that she was neglected, okay? But she was. Emily is so much more than her sexuality. It just makes me sad because she could have been so good for so many people. They were so attached to her. I was looking at the show as a whole, so there's a lot to dive into, but I'm super proud of this video and I love talking about this. It was so much fun. Yeah, those are my thoughts. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Subscribe so you can be here before 10,000, which is so exciting. And I will see you guys for my next video.